and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer, really, standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes, and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello, everyone. It's Martin Willis. Welcome to the show. And we are live in College Park, Maryland. I almost said Virginia. We're pretty close to Virginia. And right a stone's throw away from Goddard Space Flight Center, or Flight Space Center, or whatever. You know what I mean.
Space
NASA.
Flight Center.
Yeah. And you just heard Ray Stanford. Welcome to the show, Ray.
Hi, good to be here.
Yeah, and also we have Tony Angiola. I knew I'd screw that up. And we have Ben Moss here as well. They came up from Virginia to join us in the show. There's not going to be any news this evening. I gave Alejandro the night off. And thank you, supporters. So this is going to be a 2-hour show. And supporters get to listen to the second hour for only $1 a month or more. And I want to thank all of my listeners either way. We do have a chat room, and that's at podcastufo.com. We also have a phone number you can call, and that's 603-967-4030. I want to tell everyone that we have Art Bell back on this very station, and that is, it is midnight Eastern Standard Time, but it's 9 p.m. Pacific Time, and he runs until midnight out there. And it's a great show. The sound quality is amazing. I hope you can check it out. And it's really great having Art back. And I'm actually kind of proud to be on the same station that Art's on. And it's been a lot of fun, these shows we're doing live. I was really nervous to do a live show in the beginning. And now, you know, when I screw up, well, that just happens, and you just kind of move on and go from there. But one thing I don't have to worry about is a guest not being here when I call him. He's right here beside me. And again, jump in the chat room if you'd like and pose some questions, or you're welcome to call at any time at 603-967-4030. You might want to write that down. And we have a number of people in the chat room, and we're ready to go. Again, I said welcome to the show, Ray. It's been a real pleasure being here the last few days. I don't even know if we could cover the things we've gone over. Amazing things. Thank you for welcoming me in your home.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Why don't we just, I figure at some point we got to talk about Socorro, because it always comes up. You were one of the very first people there, and so many revelations have happened. And a lot of people might say something like, oh, that's such an old case, but there's still a lot of significant things coming forward about that case, so I'd like to talk about that.
Okay.
But you have been, why don't you give the new listener your background, basically?
Well, I heard about Socorro within 2 days after it happened, and it happened on Friday the 24th of April, 1964, and I got there just about 2 hours after Dr. J.L.N. Hynek, the Air Force scientific consultant on UFOs, got there on the 28th. And thus, the next morning, I was invited by Dr. Hynek to join him and the police officer witness from Socorro, Lonnie Zamora, and the State Highway Patrolman, Sam Chavez, who was the first policeman to arrive on the site after the event, and thus to be involved in the complete interview with them and to see it reenacted from the standpoint of where Zamora got out of his police car and went about 15 feet toward the object, leaving 35 feet between him and the object, and then all hell broke loose.
Right. And one of the things you said to me that really impressed me yesterday was that Lonnie was, in your opinion, one of the most credible people you ever have known.
Yes, I consider him perhaps as absolutely incredible as anyone that I have ever interviewed. Not only that, but I should point out that the late scientist, Dr. Lincoln La Paz, who tracked meteorites from the sightings of seeing the meteor in the air glowing through the atmosphere. There was an event one night in New Mexico, and after Lonnie Zamora came out and reported this incredible encounter, La Paz came back and said, look, I want to say that this man is an incredibly honest and actively good observer. Said he was the most accurate report that he received. He took the coordinates of the elevation and the azimuth of the object from Zamora, and when he got it from all the other people, they put it together and located the fallen meteorite. He said that Zamora was as accurate as any human could have possibly been. He said this man is a very exceptionally careful observer. So, but it was my experience with Zamora, too, that led me to appreciate not only his objectivity, but his total and complete honesty.
Right, right. And about you, Ray, I can't believe how many sightings you had. I tried to get you to tell me about how many you've had. You've had so many, and not only have you had them, but you've had this rule of thumb to always carry your camera and your video camera with you, or your movie camera all the way back to the 60s.
Right, 50s.
50s, all the way back to the 50s. You have caught so much on film. I can't believe what I've seen these last couple of days. Amazing. And would you care to guess how many sightings you've had?
No, I really, you see, I don't, the only ones I really keep track of are the ones where I got either movies, and these are not electronic films. These are absolutely old emulsion film movies, in one case in 16 millimeter and the others in 8 millimeter and Super 8 millimeter. And I keep track of the ones where I got hard evidence. Otherwise, I consider them, I record them, but I don't keep account of them because there are a lot of things, and it's just like all the things out there as anecdotes. They're just anecdotes. I think they count for science when you have hard evidence.
Right, right. But now I'd like to just pass around the room a little bit right here. And Tony Angiola, can you tell us? Hello there. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Tony Angiola, and I've been with MUFON since the 90s. I also want to take this opportunity to thank you for having us on the show.
Oh, sure.
And I also want to thank Jan Harzan for hooking us up with Ray. I don't want to tell the background on exactly how we met Ray. I'll let Ben do that because he gets most of the credit, for this connection, because we spent over 100 hours with Ray by this point. But basically, I investigate UFOs in my spare time. I presently work full-time for a small IT company called Friendly Systems in Chantilly, Virginia.
Wait a minute, was that a plug?
It kind of was, because I promised my boss I'd say something. But in my spare time, Ben and I, we do a lot of cases together, and we collaborate on many cases, and it's a lot of fun. We try to have fun any chance we can. And like I said, when we come here to Ray's house, it's like an education. It's like a college education in physics, photographic analytics, you name it. Ray's got a vast knowledge.
Dinosaurs, don't forget that.
You know what? We haven't touched on that yet.
Oh, really?
After 100 hours, we haven't gotten to dinosaurs yet. He slips it in every now and then. We inadvertently learn something about a notosaur, but Ben and I try to steer the conversation back to ufology, which we're still learning, and Ray has so much to teach us. So
yeah, and Ben, you and I met in Phoenix.
Correct.
And you actually found me with my Podcast UFO T-shirt out there, and which you're wearing one now. Thank you. And it was great to meet you, and you really encouraged me even more. I already said that I was coming down to Ray's, and you really encouraged me. You said, you've got to get there, and thank you for that.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you have to experience it to really know what Ray has. You have to be here and sit through his presentations and look at all the evidence he has. It's fascinating. It's something that you wouldn't even believe until you saw it. It's just been an experience. Ray's like a mentor to us. He teaches a lot about photographic evidence and the footage he has, the things he's captured, the things he's seen, the life he's had is just very interesting. I think there's about 10 more books in Ray, and we could probably write 3 or 4 ourselves about Ray with all the things we've experienced. But it's been a great meeting Ray. We got lucky. I was looking for some Socorro footage that I'd seen on a TV show in the 80s, and that got around to Ray, and through some mutual contacts, we were put in touch with Ray. I finally found the footage. It wasn't as detailed as we thought, but it brought up the whole Socorro thing again. And Ray has showed us some very interesting things about Socorro that I think are going to bring that back into the limelight.
Great. And Ray, this question is for you. One of the conversations you and I've had in the last couple of days is and this may rub a few people the wrong way, but this video and film evidence you have, you're kind of reluctant to put it out there, and because you're afraid of what could happen with ufology getting hold of it. And
no, I'm not really afraid of that. It's just that I know how many people with unfounded knowledge who don't have a good background can look at something and make up all kind of fantasies about it. What I think you're talking about is a photograph that I took on August 24th, 1964. And the reason I'm hesitant to release it is because in the first place, my friend Bob McGarry and I were there to do magnetic measurements on the dynamite shack to see if there was magnetic residual effects from the event back in April. And then we had an appointment coming up with Lonnie Zamora at 2 o'clock when he got off police duty. And so we're rushing through, and I took a picture of Bob McGarry standing in front of the dynamite shack to give a size reference and also to focus in the door which had who owned the dynamite shack welded on the front of it. And I took that picture paying no attention at all to the horizon, certainly not expecting UFOs to show up. I mean, you're there on a hot day just doing what you think is the job you should be doing. And it turns out I recorded something incredible in the picture. I never looked at it seriously at all. I mean, it was just a picture of a dynamite shack, and since the magnetic measurements I decided probably were not of really scientific importance, I really didn't look at it over the years. But back about, I guess, 2.5 years ago, it's hard to say now, on the Internet, I saw someone ask a question. He asked, does anybody know who owned the dynamite shack? Now, I don't know why I wanted to know that, but I felt I had the answer. I remembered the photograph I had taken, a black and white photograph, and this was, I think, 124 days probably after the Socorro event, and it was probably, I would guess, it was somewhere after 1 o'clock in the afternoon, or just around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, on a bright day there in Socorro, and I had taken this picture. Well, I pulled it out and realized when I enlarged it on the view screen that I did have where the dynamite shack had come from on the door. And I noticed something back on the western horizon. I noticed more than one thing. There was an object off to the left, a little less than a half degree above the southwestern horizon. And then over across on the right side, of the far right side, there was another object. Strangely, the object on the left horizon looked like it could well be the shape of what Lonnie Zamora had seen of the object when it had its landing gear folded in, an ellipsoidal object, an egg-shaped, in other words, object. But on the right side, it was more astonishing. There was a thing that was also about a half degree or a little less above the and these are based on objective measurements from the photograph and knowing the focal length of the lens and so forth. But this object there looked like the Socorro object with its landing gear deployed. And I thought, oh my gosh. And to the left of it were three things that looked like they were way off in the distance, probably three discs. One of them was just above a break in the mountains, a low place in the mountains where thermal gradient would be pretty much differential across there compared to the atmosphere above it. And so the one nearest that lowest place actually shows apparently optical warp from the thermal gradient across the low place between the mountains. They were beyond the mountains, apparently. And to make matters worse, off in the distance, would be far to the southwest of Socorro, there's a thing that looks for all the world like what the textbook UFO would say is a mothership. And this is just too good to be true. It's so darn good, it's astonishing. I keep looking. Sometime in the middle of the night, I get up and turn the thing on and look at it, and I say, is this possible? Neither Bob McGarry or I saw anything, but we weren't looking. These objects are all within less than a half degree above the western horizon. We weren't looking. We certainly weren't expecting UFOs out there. I mean, nobody in the right mind opinion goes to a place where something happened 124 days earlier and expects to see the same kind of objects. But anyway, that's what happened, and I discovered these things there, and I want to stress this to everybody. I am not an entertainer. I'm not here to entertain. I'm not here to prove to anyone that UFOs come from any particular source, be it ET or extra-dimensional or anything else. I'm here to try to get hard data that is diagnostic of the propulsion and that tells us something about the level of technology that might be represented. This picture is gee whiz, and I do wish Lonnie Zamora alive to see it. I think he'd be thrilled. I hope to contact his daughter again and show it to her, who's been in contact with me. But I really don't care if anybody believes it, and I may not release it, because when this is seen, it's going to be... People are going to say it's impossible this man could have had this luck. Well, if people think I have created a hoax and waited 50 years to reveal it, they better think again. I mean, if I had faked a photograph on this, it's on this old film, and all the other pictures on it taken at the site, we can prove that it's the old film. And so help me God, I had no idea these things were there, but I'm thrilled to look at them, and you guys have had fun looking at them. But it doesn't have the scientific import of physics so much as the better material I have from color movies and still photographs.
Well, to me, I have to tell you this. Before I saw that, we had a conversation about it.
Right.
And I was a bit skeptic about it. I was like, oh, that's just, that's kind of far-fetched that this could actually happen. And then I actually saw it today. First of all, I saw the original picture and the size of it, and it's the very tiny objects, but once they're blown up, I think it's the most incredible picture that I looked at in the last 2 days. I really do. I think it's the most awe-inspiring and most valid picture of. It looks exactly like the craft that was drawn, exactly with the landing gear down, perfectly. I mean, everything about it is a perfect replica of what Lonnie Zamora described.
Well, yes. Even the landing gear, they're at the kind of angles that he described to me that I put in the illustrations in my 1976 Socorro book. And but let me say that your positive emotional reaction to it, though, is more based upon, I would suspect, as with most people, a long-held desire, gee, I wish I could have seen what Lonnie Zamora saw. And in feeling that way, when you see it, there's naturally a great sense of fulfillment that you finally seen it. But scientifically, this black and white photograph, as amazing as it is, doesn't hold the scientific water that the movies and incredible telephoto still shots in daylight that we have from the standpoint of diagnosis. For example, where I have the films of the beam ahead that can enable an object to travel hypersonic speeds without pushing a hypersonic shock wave in front of it, without, in fact, creating one. And these kind of things are the things, to me, that are important. Truly, you're right. There's a great emotional reward in the Socorro photograph, I admit it. But because I don't like the way I've been treated by the public, I was called a liar when I said that Lonnie Zamora saw an inverted V with 3 lines across it. And I hinted it in the back of my Socorro book in 1976. Most people didn't believe me. They believed NICAP, who said, well, and I'd warned them that they should put a caution in there that the thing they were saying, which was an arc with a vertical arrow with a line under it, they were saying this was what Lonnie Zamora really saw. I told them, I said, there's serious question about this. Well, subsequently, after Lonnie Zamora died, I told that Lonnie Zamora was simply covering for the government, that he had been asked by Richard T. Holder, the captain that was in charge of the Northern Integrated Holloman White Sands Range on the day of the event, that he had been asked to tell the wrong thing, to tell something different than what he saw. Nobody believed me. People accused me of destroying the Socorro case and making a liar out of Zamora if he believed it. But the truth of the matter is, Lonnie was a wonderful and a political and a man who loved his country. He had served in the Army, and he complied with the request of Captain Holder to do this. Fortunately, Captain Holder's son, Richard T. Holder, Jr., saw the flack I was taking for announcing this after Lonnie had passed on, and his daughter wrote me a very sweet letter, and she appreciated the eulogy that revealed this, and she thanked me for it. But I took flack. Finally, but Richard T. Holder, Jr., Captain Holder's son, wrote me, and he said, look, I see the flack you've been taking. He said, I want to set the world straight. He said, I want to give you a statement, because my dad told me that he asked Zamora to obfuscate, to hide the real symbol, and to provide a substitute, and he did. And Richard T. Holder, Jr. suddenly provided me with a signed statement revealing this. And the next reward that again overcame some of the negativity I'd had from the UFO community was that I found at the National Archive with James Fox there, I actually found a letter from Hynek written on September 7, 1964. And he actually draws the inverted V with 3 lines. And it's in a handwritten letter to Project Blue Book. How can we deny this? On top of this, Rob Mercer in Ohio, a MUFON person in Ohio, has uncovered documents, Blue Book documents, in which Hynek telephoned Blue Book from Socorro and said that Sergeant Chavez, who was the first one to get there and interview Zamora, said that Zamora told him it was inverted V with 3 lines. There's additional evidence as well. So I've been vindicated. But I don't like the flag, frankly. And these people mostly have not apologized to me. And I don't intend to give them anything as nice as this photograph because, frankly, I don't like it. If I get some apologies from certain people, I might come out. But, frankly, I'm not here to entertain. I'd prefer to show this evidence that you've seen to physical scientists and engineers.
Okay. Well, there are people that are a lot of people that you dealt with aren't around anymore, the ones that were giving you trouble, I'm sure.
No, they're around.
They are around.
They're around, yes.
Well, I take that back.
Rich Reynolds, for one.
Okay. Well, a number of people are saying, people are disappointed you're not showing the picture. I understand.
That's fine. I'm not here to convert people to UFOs.
Yeah. Okay, but I think they want us to move on because the picture's not going to be going to be told. So let's go, for the listener who has not heard you before, Ray, I'll talk about how you got interested. You were interested at a very young age. Was it
right?
A lot of people saw like a comic book or a book or something that got them fascinated in the subject. What set you off in the beginning?
Well, I'm so old that there were no comic books on UFOs when I got interested. The truth of the matter is, I was born in 1938, and Kenneth Arnold reports of the objects that he saw June 24, 1947. Well, when school started the next year, of course, I guess it was the third grade. But anyway, I was 9. And I was swinging on the swing one day in the schoolyard, and the principal's wife was out there watching us kids in a little farm town of Odom, Texas. And I got to thinking about the flying saucer reports I'd heard. And I jumped off the swing. Don't ask me why. I jumped off the swing and walked up to this lady, the principal's wife, that I'd never talked to before. And I said, Mrs. Shelton, when I grow up, I'm going to investigate what these flying saucers are. And when I find out, I'm going to let the whole world know. She said not a word. She did a military-style about-face instantly and pranced off across the schoolyard, which is probably the best thing she could have done because it annealed my determination to do so. But I watched for UFOs after my parents and I moved to Corpus Christi from Odom. I watched from the flat roof garage from age 9 until age 15 and never saw anything that I thought was a UFO despite hundreds of hours of watching. So I'm not an imaginative person. But on the other hand, I was talking to my first serious girlfriend on the telephone on the night of June 10th, 1954, and a knock came at the door. I refused to answer it, and pretty soon it became a bang at the front door, and the man at the door said, "Listen, I'm Officer Ritchie," he was a policeman, "from across the street. Ray, you've been watching for flying saucers for as long as I have known you. There's one flying over your house. All your neighbors are out watching it. And why don't you come out here?" I said, "Goodbye, Emily." And I took off, and I saw my first one. So my virginity went.
Was it, which virginity went? Oh, the flying saucer.
The UFO virginity.
Oh, I got it. Yeah. I got it. So, Ben, the next question's for you. Ben, both you and Tony have both been here. What do you think about all the different things that that you've seen since you've been here?
Well, Ray definitely has some footage, some photographs. The photograph we were just talking about that are very, very interesting. I think that he's captured some incredible technology. It's operating in our atmosphere. You have to be objective. Nobody can say where this is from, what it is. I could probably truthfully say we didn't make it. I think that the evidence speaks for itself. And like Ray said, if somebody who wasn't worried about being attached to the subject, with the PhD, scientific background, that really, really wanted to have a look at some hard evidence about what this is captured on film or photograph, needs to come take a look at what Ray has and then make a determination, because the evidence is there in the footage, old emulsion film, as Ray mentioned, not tampered with, still in the box, actually, still on the reel type frame or whatever format he's captured it on, and the photographs speak for themselves. The films, are old. We haven't seen some of them, but and the photograph, the Socorro photograph we talked about, I've seen it. It's there. To me, it vindicates what Lonnie said. And anybody that has any questions about Lonnie, that's just another thing that shows he was telling the exact truth, and he was very good at describing what he saw, because it looks exactly like what the drawing turned out to be that Ray did. And I think Ray's just in the right place at the right time and has captured some things that really needs to be seen by people who can talk about it in a very high-level scientific way, and not have armchair quarterbacks trying to debunk or talk about it when they don't even understand what the technology is that he's captured.
Right. And we're going to, in the second part of the show, we'll talk about, kind of the things going on. We'll touch on the things going on that you've investigated and things like that. So, Tony, I'll just throw this at you. What was, for you, some of the things that you've seen here that just kind of like stood out?
Yeah, basically echoing everything Ben just said. And on top of that, I want to say that Ray is one of the few people still around that knew people like George Adamski and just about every single person that had anything to do with ufology in the time span that ufology has pretty much existed. So on top of that, he mentioned that he only likes to talk about those things that he filmed and photographed. Well, I can tell you he's actually done more than that. He's done drawings of things that he's seen. Today I scanned 4 or 5 different documents from 1954 that not only had detailed reports, some of the best reporting you can imagine, things we don't really see today in reports. As much information as we try to capture, say, in the MUFON CMS database, because it's all digital, people don't really have the opportunity to draw, scan, upload, say, diagrams like you would in the old days, let alone accurately detail exactly what you saw, the way that Ray's done in some of these old-fashioned reports. And I wish I could just laminate every one of these pieces of paper. But I was scanning them, and I noticed on the back he had these very detailed drawings. I can easily read what he wrote, look at the diagram, and understand exactly what he was trying to report. And again, you don't really see that too much, and maybe it's because we're in a new medium and we need to educate people on how to properly report what they've seen, or even better, have investigators properly dissect what people are trying to report. But from everything I've seen here, I'm not smart enough to understand it, and I'm learning all the time, and I hope to just keep learning from Ray. And again, he's got more stuff hidden in these walls than we can ever imagine.
Yeah. I feel the same way. I agree with you. It's like some of the stuff is just over my head. But, Ray, can you talk a little bit about how you think, through the different things you've actually shown all of us here in this room, how you think the propulsion... You said that you think there's 2 different types of propulsion. Yes. One is for low height or whatever, 20 feet or below. And then once they get above 20 feet, and you think most of the craft you film have this type of propulsion?
Well, what I was telling you in that respect is simply that in all the reliable cases that I've studied that seem credible to me, what happens is, whether it's a disc or whether it's the object at Socorro, the object seems to use a primary drive, whether complex or simple, we don't know, but it comes in and stops usually about 20 feet above the surface. and then it lowers down seemingly with a different propulsion mode to a landing or to hover just above the ground. When it leaves, it does not take off from high speed from the ground. It, again, rises to about 20 feet and then takes off, sometimes at high speed, sometimes somewhat more slowly, as was the case at Socorro. But this suggests that there might be something endemic to the primary propulsion drive that would be dangerous near the ground. Could it pull up objects and slam them against the craft? Could it throw objects around that might injure somebody or something? We don't know the reason. But I know I go way back to, I was talking at a Civics Club meeting in 1957 in Corpus Christi, Texas. And an old gentleman waited until everybody left. He said, I waved around. I didn't dare say this in front of my buddies, but he said, 2 fishing friends of mine and I, back in, I think it was 1952, he said, we were fishing along. He said, all of a sudden there was a hum, and lo and behold, right in front of us, we saw this dome disc. He said it was small, about 20 feet in diameter, and it had a clear dome. He said, I couldn't believe it. He said, I'd never believed in these things, but here were these 2 little guys looking at us. And he said, I didn't know what the heck to do. He said, I knew they weren't human because they were too small. And he said, stupidly, I guess, he said, I raised my right hand and waved. He said, I couldn't think of anything else to do. He said, and guess what? One of the 2 guys waved back. And I thought, oh, I haven't gotten into something. He said, then it's raised up slowly to 20 feet and then took off like a bat out of hell at kind of an angle, going up pretty steeply, though, in the sky. Well, this kind of behavior has been reported all over the world. I think of close encounter cases in France, Italy, the United States, South America, and this is a consistent thing. In fact, if anybody told me that they saw a UFO come in high speed, plop on the ground, and then plop off without going through this precautionary mode, I would be somewhat dubious, because it is consistently reported, and again, it was reported in Socorro. And I want to say about Socorro, people think, well, that's unique. We've never heard of that before. Well, I'm sorry. They better read my book. I have a whole chapter of cases before Socorro of similar cases. And I myself, since Socorro, have seen, and the people with me have seen, Socorro-type objects within 400 feet. The objects are real, this elliptical-type object. I should tell people that depending on its seeming energy state around its surface, it can be like Zamora saw, and it can just as quickly become the blackest black you've ever seen, or it can spin a spiraling blue-white pattern around it and look like bright electrical blue. And I've seen this. And I want to say one more thing. I may have left the impression earlier that I'm definitely not ever going to release this photo. I don't want to say that. I may release it, but I'm going to have to feel the right circumstances and get a right feeling about it, because I don't want to slip into being accused of being a UFO entertainer like I think certain major UFO organizations are, and they make a mistake doing. I want to focus on my research. And so I may decide to release it under the right circumstance. I don't want to sound exclusive and say, no, I will not, because I would love to share it. But I may wait till after I'm dead and then ask it to be released, so I don't have to take the flak from predictable sources.
Okay. All right. Now, one of the things you had shown me is sort of like video and photo evidence of the propulsion with the different swirling and all that. And let's talk a little bit about the McMinnville UFO. You looked into that. You actually looked into that to prove it, or thinking it may have been a hoax. But why don't you
That's
talk
right.
about that?
I was extremely dubious of the McMinnville photographs. Because I didn't like, here they saw something incredible, and yet when the word got out to an individual that happened to have told about it in town, when investigators came to find the film, they found the negatives under the couch, all dirty, fingerprinted, and just filthy, both photographs. And I said, well, why would anybody? Well, let's keep in mind that they were farm people. She was out feeding her bunnies, and she saw this thing. She called her husband. He came out to camera, and he got pictures. But I took these pictures. Once I had learned to do a bit of image processing, I took them onto my, I scanned some high resolution. These are not copies out of books. I had copies that had been provided me that I was told were taken made from the original Trent negatives. High resolution, good copies you can get aside from the dirt on the photographic negative. And I scanned these, and I was frankly looking for supporting wire or wires. I thought I might be able to prove a hoax. Much to the contrary, I was shocked at what I found. The first thing, by just a little contrast enhancement of the scan, I could immediately see an expanding column of darker downflow under the middle of the object that went right down and curved toward the witnesses. Well, this is real interesting because that's photo 1. They stated that when they photographed photo 1, just before the picture was clicked, its edge was kind of toward them and it rotated up toward them, and both Mr. and Mrs. Trent said, shortly after that raised up, the woman said, a terrible blast of air hit me. And he said basically the same thing. Well, you can see the blast of air. And the reason you can see it, I believe, is that I learned this from a physicist friend of mine in Europe when he was analyzing one of my films of UFOs taken right after the sun had set. He pointed out that when you're looking into the west and the sun has just set, the light is highly polarized. Well, when you have a condition that would cause refractive index differential from a hot downflow in a column underneath the object, it's going to refract differentially than the air around it. And it just happens that the camera was looking basically west, and the light was highly polarized, and so this is an ideal situation. If light had been unpolarized, it wouldn't be so easy to see a refractive pattern in a thermal current underneath the object that's spinning. But in this case, it's beautifully clear. I challenge anybody that's got a good photograph of it to simply increase darken the midtones, and you will see the spiral downward. Why certain famous people that claim they've analyzed these photographs miss this? Well, I can say they're either got a closed mind or they're blind and are not thinking very far. After all, when they said a blast hit them, one should look for evidence. I wasn't. It just confronted me when I was looking for suspension lines. Now, the second thing is more evidential. Nobody in ufology has ever pointed this out, but real UFOs, when photographed in daylight, and it's especially obvious when the light is highly polarized, as it was during the Trent photographs, as I described. When you photograph objects under these conditions, if they're real, there will be multiple images of the object, ghost images, arrayed around them. They almost look like they were in sequence laid over each other, and you can see these. Take a look, and you can often, when you look at the naked eye, you won't see this. What you'll see is simply a bluer sky around it than the rest of the sky. That's because these images are being generated by whatever means at extremely high speed, and you are flicker fusing them into a blue blur. But when you take photograph at high shutter speed, you will be, your camera, your film, or your imagery, electronic imagery, will catch these images that are so fast the perception cannot record them, or at least register them. And you will get these, and by golly, I can show you pictures that I took from a movie film taken at the entrance to Andrews Air Force Base here on February 16th, 1986, and I can show you hundreds of images of the object, some of which are substantially clearer than the object itself. I can show you photographs taken from Goddard Space Flight Center in broad daylight that I took under the same circumstances, highly polarized light. And one of the images you saw today is 2.2 times the diameter of the actual thing I was watching, but it's sharper. It's not as saturated, but you can see the seeming construction panels in it and so forth. But here's the thing about Trent. By golly, much to my shock, there in photo 1 were beautiful multiple images of that amazing-looking thing that's in the photograph. And they're not as clear in photo 2. It had moved off of the west a little bit, and the backlighting was not as polarized. Could be the reason. I can show you the images of it in photo 2, but they are, in my opinion, undeniable. They are beautiful in photo 1. Now, that takes a little more sophisticated image processing to bring the range of subtle densities out that will reveal these, but they're there, and I can show them to anyone. This made me so convinced that I have said I will swear my life on the authenticity of the photograph. I don't care what skeptics like Vicente Juan Ballesta Olmos in Spain says, that these things were fake. There was a report which he published from people saying they're scientific. They said, now let us suppose this. Therefore, if this, let us suppose this. Therefore, this would be fake. This is not the way you do science. You don't suppose anything. You look at the evidence and make deductions from the evidence. These photographs are genuine. I don't care what anybody says. The Trents could never have thought of making a downflow underneath the thing. When they said a blast hit them, they never referred to seeing it. They didn't. It's too subtle. But the camera recorded it. And likewise, these multiple images, they knew nothing about this, neither do 99.999% of UFO researchers, because they look at UFO photos for only one reason. They ask themselves, will I be able to convince my skeptical friends or the media that this is an extraterrestrial craft with ET in it or little green men in it? This is silly. They should be looking at these things for physical evidence that illuminates the physics involved. And so that's my feeling on the Trent photographs.
All right. I'm sure there are some good people out there as well trying to investigate these. Yes?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Well, let's take a little bit of a flip. And what's your opinion on, you know I'm going to ask you this, don't you? Billy Meyer's photos.
Wow.
I want you to...
That's not worth even speaking about.
No. I want you to talk... I would like
Okay,
to...
let me tell you some of the things I know.
That's what I want you to talk about. We had this conversation, and you were telling me about what you saw in these photos.
Okay, let me tell you about some of the things. The late Wendell Stevens. I could talk about him personally if you like. But anyway, let me tell you what happened. He used to let me go through his files, and I was looking for correlations to things that my project and I had filmed. Because there are correlations, nice correlations out there. Not many, but there are some. And it's nice to have them, because in science, replication of a phenomenon is extremely important. But one Sunday, I was there at his place, and he was letting me go through looking for these correlations. And he said, Ray, I've got to go over to the mall. I'll be there about an hour or more. He said, I'll be back, but feel free to look through anything that's here. Well, he had the walls of that room. He had bookshelves all the way to the ceiling, and he had photo albums on these. These were not in the days with electronic photographs and images in your computer. In a tiny little drive, you got everything. These are all on his walls. Well, I looked up there, and I already knew that Billy Edward Meyer was fake. Everything he ever produced is a fake. And what I did, I looked up there, and here's Billy Edward Meyer, album after album. I pulled that one album, and here was a black and white photograph. It showed a pyramid-looking thing in the background and a clearly cloth-stuffed dinosaur in the foreground that had buttons sewed on for eyes. You could see there were 4 holes in the button, and you could see the thread holding the button in place. I said, fun and games. Okay, I'll show this to Wendell when he gets back. Well, I picked up another one, and it said that here was a series of photographs. I forget the name of the place there in Switzerland. He said Semyasis time-scanning spacecraft is coming down, is luring down in front of the camera. Well. Guess what? Here it is. I took the closest one first, where it was nearest the ground. I look up at it. It's in the photograph. It's a color photograph. And here is a plate turned on potter's wheel. You can see where the fingers went on the potter's wheel as it would finish out the bottom plate. You can see where it stopped. You can see where the fingers stopped and the ends of the fingers are. And to make matters worse, I mean, you can tell it was on a potter's wheel, but it's being held to another sort of plate on top of it. And guess what? It's being held with masking tape, and it's peeling off on the edge. I look up at the dome. It has these square supposed windows or whatever Semyazi would claim they were. And they're day-glow stickers that you can buy in a drugstore. And they're square day-glow stickers, and one of them is peeling off. You actually see the back side of it. I mean, the corner is peeling up, and you can see it. So, fun and games. And I looked at the others, and the same thing. As you get further away, a little hard to see, but you can see all this. So, at about an hour and a half, Wendell comes back. And I said, Wendell, I said, my God, have you seen this ridiculous thing with this pyramid and this so-called dinosaur? And he says, oh, yes. I opened it up. I said, this is what I'm talking about. I want to make sure you know what I'm talking about. He said, yeah, sure, I know the picture. I said, do you know that that's a stuffed dinosaur? Can't you see the button? Can't you see the holes? Can't you see the thread holding the button in? And he says, yes, I know that's there. I said, then why did you publish this? There's one book, it's hard to get a copy of. I've got a Xerox of it, that shows this thing. He said, I said, wait, I've got one more thing to show you. So I pulled up the picture of the series of Semyazi's craft coming down with the day-glow sticker peeling and the masking tape peeling and the plate that was made on a potter's wheel. And I said, Wendell, didn't you see that that's simply a plate? He said, well, I kind of thought that. I said, well, didn't you notice the masking tape and how it's peeling? He said, yeah, I know the tape's peeling. I said, how about that day-glow sticker? He said, yeah, I know it's a day-glow sticker and I know it's peeling. I said, then why did you publish some of these photographs, ones that don't show this to clear? Why did you publish some in a newsstand UFO magazine? He said, Ray, the truth of the matter is, that exposing hoax doesn't make any money. This makes a lot more money when you claim they're real.
Really?
And he said that. So help me God, he said it.
Wow. I was thinking maybe the aliens were on a budget,
Oh, well, yeah, probably so. I guess they had to get some cheap masking tape to hold their craft together. Let me tell you about another one, though. Now, this I checked. My wife, she retired just in January last year from the Goddard Space Flight Center after 30-some-odd years there. Had a very responsible position, by the way. She was, I'll advertise her, she was a contracting officer, technical representative over the entire equipment and supply section of the last 4 Hubble Space Telescope servicing missions, which she received NASA's Exceptional Achievement Award. But anyway, Sheila and I looked at the photographs that he claimed were taken from Semyazi's time scanner. He claimed they went up and they saw the Apollo-Soyuz docking. And he took a picture of this great docking. There's only one problem. When you look at the picture, you can see the curvature at the top is photographed from a TV screen. Only a bigger problem than that is that, and I confirmed this with the authorities in Houston, when the media were down there for the Apollo-Soyuz docking, they shot some shots of an old mock-up that NASA had paid to have made of the Apollo, the Soyuz, rather, craft that Apollo would be docking with. And when they got the data from Russia or the Soviet Union, whichever it was, I guess it was the Soviet Union back then, when they got the data, they thought they were going to have a certain type of solar panels on there, and so NASA had the little model made with these solar panels. The problem is that before it was launched, they decided they could do better on the solar panels. They changed the design. And Semyazi's picture with the time scanner shows the old ones they planned to have, but they never sent up, that were in the model, that in fact the cameras were shooting in the entrance foyer in the building there, and he had clicked them with his camera and lied and said that they were taken from Semyazi's spacecraft. Bad luck, fellow, because you photographed a model that didn't even represent what was up there. Now, let me tell you what Wendell said. He said, well, Ray, I'm going to Switzerland next week. I'm going to be talking to Billy. I'm going to tell him about this and what you said. Well, guess what? He called me when he came back. He said, Ray, I told Billy, and he said that Semyazi has recalled all those photographs as evidence.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Now, there's a couple of questions up here for you, and one of them is, why do you feel, this was someone that called and actually talked to you yesterday while I was here, and she wants to know, why do you feel sort of negative about the Hawking and rich Russian, millionaire announcement, the $100 million grant to search for
okay.
ET?
Well, Hynek said, of course, attempting to get radio signals from distant places in space is like the as yet unborn, the long dead communing with the as yet unborn. But furthermore, let's look at this. We are now at the point we are using RF in everything from our iPhones to you name it, but we have been using this a very short time. And a really very short time. Let's look at it at what, for example, experts that talk about the future of technology. If you get 50 years from us now, my God, what are we going to be doing? I'll make a prediction. I believe that we will abandon radio frequency. We find out in first place it is dangerous to our bodies, so much of it. And I believe that we will be using something we never have dreamed of. It might be akin to using certain quantum mechanical properties. Now, if you're into that, and if you read what's been discovered recently in this new meson, this I think it's the guy's name. He predicted in 1928. It starts with a W. I can't recall his name, but he had predicted a certain particle, a particle that has no mass. In 1938, they have just proven it exists, but the literature says that this will revolutionize everything we know in electronics and probably in communications, etc. Well, look here. When you make these kind of progresses in a short time, you're going to abandon RF communication, I believe. And I think that most advanced civilizations are way beyond smoke signals. I consider RF communication to be basically smoke signals compared to what an advanced technology would be using. So that's why I laugh at it. They're trying to do the same thing that the CT project has been doing for years, unsuccessfully apparently. And look, these guys are myopic. Why don't they look at the evidence? If they want to come over and see the evidence, I'll show them the movie films. I'll show them what I've got. There is something from somewhere else, I don't know where, that is an advanced technology that is coming here. And there is the evidence. When you have the advanced technology and the evidence of it, I mean, I not only have daylight films, but during some of these films, as you saw tonight, I have recordings of the extreme low frequency magnetic field simultaneously with a strange signal modulation on the recording gravimeter. Let me give you a little anecdote. Dr. Heineck one day called me and said, would you mind if I brought two flight seasoned astronauts, they had flown in space, over to talk to you at the project office in Austin? I said, I'd be delighted. So he brought the two astronauts over and was sitting there, and I said, Ray, tell them about all the equipment you have out there. And so he even showed them some of the pictures from some of my film on the wall. Here are these two flight-seasoned astronauts. And then I said, and by the way, we have a recording gravimeter. To my shock, both of these gentlemen sprang forward in their seats and leaned forward and almost said at the same time, that's where you're going to get the evidence. And they said it in a way that was not speculation. You could tell they knew something. But I'm not the type that asks people who've taken a security oath to tell secrets that they're supposed to keep. I don't believe in that. But I know enough from the way they reacted. And they kept on talking about it for maybe 5-7 minutes. They were so thrilled that I was using this. This shows me that the astronauts have been taught that these things are using a gravity-like effect. Now, let me say, this may not be a gravity wave as a physicist might think of it, but if you had if you were able to locally modulate the local passage of time and it were pulsed, this would be indetectable on our recording gravimeter from a gravity wave. I'm more inclined to think that's what we have recorded rather than gravity wave. But if you have that, you control your relationship to gravity, because in the equation, just for acceleration due to gravity, it's time rate of increase of velocity. So time is the major component in the equation. And so if you're controlling time, pulsing time, it's going to show up on a gravimeter as a gravity wave.
Right. We have a couple of questions up here, Ray. And in the second part of the show, I'm going to get Ray to actually talk about some discs, that he has some ancient discs that, I mean, they look exactly like flying saucers. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about a live landing that he was listening to on Apollo 14. I want to talk about that. Dr. Edgar Mitchell was on that flight. Alan Shepard was on that flight. And I actually want to find out if anyone actually can find the live recording that has not been altered from that. So the question up on the message board, and by the way, anyone can jump on the message board. It's at podcastufo.com. Easy sign in. And also there is a call-in capability here. That's 603-967-4030.
Okay, at the time, I was living...
I have no idea where that is coming from. Sorry about that, listeners. A question up on the chat room is, I'm wondering about connections between his psychic and channeling abilities and so many UFO sightings. Do you feel that they're related? And what do you think about channeling and UFO sightings?
Okay. Regarding channeling UFO sightings, years ago, when I was in my early 20s, I got involved in putting myself into an altered state and channeling some information. I want to be the first to say that this is a very dangerous preoccupation for the person doing it as well as those listening if they are believing and not objectively looking at the material. I, of course, know that there are psychic phenomena and there's precognition and that some psychic can pick up some things validly. My personal belief is that any advanced extraterrestrial race that comes here would have learned quickly enough about the fallibility of the human mind and its complexity that they wouldn't try to get messages to us by anybody, male or female, voice channeling. I believe that they would use something much more effective in getting their message through. Yes, I believe that psychics might be able to know how when a UFO might be around, whatever psychic ability or energy is, but I would prefer to think, based on my experience, you see, when I had that first experience on the night of June 10th, 1954, I felt a strange kind of energy. The next day, when a skeptical friend of mine from down the street and I had a much better sighting in daylight, I felt the same weird thing. For years, I felt that this was a psychic awareness of these things around there. I was wrong. In 1978, the afternoon of July 19th and the night of July 19th. My project, with our mobile laboratory, including the recording magnetometer, gravimeter, telephoto cameras, movie cameras, and spectrographic cameras, and high-quality sound recording, at the advice of a government scientist at White Sands, we were told that they were plaguing White Sands, that we ought to get out there. And we went out there, and by the time we got to West Texas, we had incredible encounters. But with us was the wonderful man who was the major financier of our project. And after this first encounter, and then the second one, which we had one in West Texas and then in northern New Mexico, I said, even after the first one, I said, wow, did you feel that? I said, I felt it before. I said, I'd learned this over the years. I said, I think it must have been psychic. I could feel that before. I felt so excited and so good. And he said, well, I felt that too. My wife was with us. This is my former wife, not my present one of 29 years. And she said, yes, I felt it too. But the guy who was our chief financier, he said, but look, Ray, let me tell you something. He said, you know me. I'm as psychic as a brass doorknob. And I felt it too. He said, Ray, that was physiological. Turns out he was right. What we did, when we recorded these and filmed these night and day, and light spectra, sound, and so on and so forth. But when we got out to California, the corporation that built the system for us, and we analog graphed it and could look at the frequencies involved, we found that some of these frequencies are in the range of deep, restful sleep. We subsequently found from a hospital uninvolved in UFO research in Spain that they had determined that when these frequencies, as an extreme low frequency magnetic field, impinge upon the human nervous system and brain, that it tends to replicate them by unknown means and tends to copy them. And if you are experiencing this in a wakeful state, you feel wonderful. I call it euphoria, U-F-O-R-I-A, but it's like the word E-U-P-H-O-R-I-A, which means a false sense of well-being. Listen, my former wife, my present wife, my children, my son when he was 4, my eldest son, my daughter when she was 6, they knew when these things were around, and we'd all go out and see them and film them. They could sense this. It's physiological. I was wrong. It was not psychic. It was physiological. And anybody can train themselves. If you've had an encounter or two and know how to recognize this, you can train yourself. But I've got to tell you, there's a phenomenon this ties in with. You've heard the cases, all of you probably, that here's Joe is sound asleep, and Betty, his wife, has gotten up to go to the kitchen or the bathroom, and she sees strange things out the window. My God, there's a craft landing in the field out there. Oh, Joe, quick, there's something out here. She can't awaken Joe. He just snores away. She can't awaken him. Normally, Joe awakens at a pin drop. What's happening? It's impinging on his brain, and your brain gets to duplicate it, and it becomes so saturated with the deep restful sleep sequence, it's hard to wake you up. But if you are awake, it makes you feel totally rested and relaxed. And you feel this wonderful euphoria, U-F-O-R-I-A. And I'll tell you, if somebody wanted to take these recordings we have of the frequency and put them on a magnetic coil and generate them, but did the experiments hopefully blind, not knowing what's going on, and the experimenter blind as well as the experiment in the phone blind, I would predict that they can train people to recognize this frequency within a matter of hours, and you can become a walking, talking UFO detector. People say, Ray, why don't you make $1 million selling it? Well, I'm sorry. I'm not here to entertain. I'm here to do some science.
Yeah. All right, we just got a couple of minutes left, and there was a related question I had right on my mind. Let me just... someone is very... asked this question of all the guests, so they want to ask you as well, and that is, how do you feel about night vision and spotting UFOs?
Well, you might see something interesting with night vision, of course. But the trouble is, you don't know what it is. Every bug, every bird, every bat that flies through, and a lot of other things have infrared signatures. And I see these people showing these and saying this is an alien spacecraft. I've got UFOs. I've never seen one that was convincing at all. I say, sure, it's a tool. You can try to use it, but by golly, you better train yourself to not get hypnotized and to religiously convince yourself you've seen what you want to see. In this field, you need to stay objective and observe carefully without conclusions. Note the details and analyze afterward. If you go to seeing something strange on the night vision or in the real sky, and you begin to, it's an alien spaceship, oh my God, do you know they might wave at me? They might scare the heck out of me. They might abduct me. They might use the anal probe on me. Well, let me tell you, you're going to get so damned hysterical and so subjective that you're going to misinterpret a lot of things, and you're not going to make a good report. You're not going to make a good reporter. And so people need to get objective. I don't care what instrument they got in front of them. The instrument does not do science. It records data. It is the observer, the analyst, that does the science. Don't forget that. Don't think that that's going to show you alien spacecraft. Please be objective.
Well, while we're giving advice, I heard you give these gentlemen advice earlier, or one of them here, Tony, you said to him, don't even think about your camera. Just pick it up and start taking pictures.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. In fact, I had to teach my wife when I first married her. She asked me if I would show her as many UFOs as I showed my former wife, and I said, well, I sure will. The very next day, my kids and we all saw it. And she was amazed. But I had to train her, not when she sees something and it becomes convincing enough that, yes, if you think about it, you might be watching something that didn't originate here and that might be technological. Just watch it. If you see anything strange, don't ask yourself, is it a UFO, is it a plane? If it looks strange, start taking pictures. Carefully note the details. Otherwise, you can color yourself by what you wish to see rather than what you're seeing. Coldly, objectively analyze, and don't go assigning what it is. This is very, very important. And not only that, but if you go getting whipped up, oh my God, my wife and I were filming the most incredible mothership, according to the literature, this was on the 17th of March, 1989. We called it the Mac Mothership because actually the only place we could find to stop was a McDonald's restaurant, which I showed you today. Mm-hmm. And by golly, I'm watching it at 10 power at 20 power in a 1,000-millimeter telephoto. And I know from the start that it's nothing ordinary because I'm seeing it that power. But it took my wife a while looking at it. Well, this is so strange, but what is it? But all of a sudden, she got a good look at it, and she said to herself, oh, that is an alien craft. And then she screamed. This was silent. Then she screamed, oh, I made it go. And sure enough, I pressed my button on the camera and started taking pictures. I got 3 more pictures. But it vanished that fast as soon as she reflected on it and said, oh, an alien craft. And she doesn't do that anymore. She is cool and objective, as anyone of scientific mind should try to be.
Right. Well, that's it for this part of the show. If you're listening live, hang in there. We're just going to have a very quick music break. And if you are listening to the podcast and want to listen to the second part of the show, all it takes is $1 a month and more for support. You can find that information right on podcastufo.com. Hang in just one moment here. All right, we're back, and we're with Ray Stanford, Tony Angiola. I can never get that right. Angiola, that's it. Yes. Pardon me just one second. We have music continuing here. And Ben Moss. So we're going to be talking a little bit more to you. I can't even, it's kind of funny. We're in this room, and there was plenty of light when we started, and now it's pitch black. I can just barely see you guys. I see the Podcast UFO T-shirt over on the other side of the room. So we're talking with... before I pass the microphone on to you, too, I want to talk quickly. It doesn't have to be quickly, but I want to talk about those discs you have. The ancient Native American discs, they were from the Illinois area. They were found in a mound in 1921. Now, I'm going to try to put these pictures up. I can't do it right now, but tomorrow, if you're listening to the podcast, I'm going to try to put these up. to show you because they're just absolutely incredible. They're on our Facebook page now, which is Facebook /podcast UFO. But anyway, they're just amazing, and they're either, I believe, did you say 800 to 1,800 years old or something like that?
Actually, the ones that really look unquestionably like the textbook UFO are the ones. The first one, one of them was found in a mound. They didn't even realize it was a mound. They were clearing trees on the east side of the Illinois River at Havana, Illinois, in 1921. And they came across this incredible thing. It's quite dense because it's made of hematite, and there's some magnetite in it because it is somewhat magnetic. And it's beautiful. It looks almost exactly like a photograph that was taken by a British airman in the 1960s, and I think it was Malaysia, which I showed you the picture of and showed you the comparison. But this thing, I have the record of this. Found in 21, I have the record. It was when it was all the years in Wisconsin in a collection, and then how it came to me, and I have it, and you have the pictures of it, which people can see, and I hope you will post them. And then the other two discs there are three others actually, but the two that I got before this one that I'm talking about, which is the largest and in some ways the most beautiful, but there are two others that are smaller, typical domed UFOs with emitters around the rim of them, and with special seeming landing engines for the special takeoff and landing thing I talked about. They seem to have special devices on the center bottom, probably for that kind of thing, if that's what they're representing. And they were found by a guy in the collection of an old fellow by the name of Piedret, who lived in the late 19th century and only in the early 20th century, died before 1915 or shortly thereafter, and he found these in western Illinois. These are out of a culture called the Hopewell culture, the Havana Hopewell culture. And then across time, apparently they were magical objects. The Indians and today a lot of them have the feeling, if you make an effigy of something, that it takes on some of the properties of the object. Well, I believe these were probably initially magical objects, having either visually seen or maybe even communicated possibly in some way with these objects. Let's keep in mind that possibly every Indian culture that was here when the white man came, there are legends. They will tell you, talk to any of them. I'm told there's one that may not have this legend, but all the rest of them, and the Pueblo Indian, for example, where I lived in Arizona, talked to some of these people, they have legends that their forefathers were in contact, apparently fairly regularly, with sky people. And anyway, these are wonderful examples. I have now 4 of these discs, and then you see them gradating into a type where it became a game that I believe simulates the docking of the disc, with a cylindrical, point-ended mothership in a game they called Chunky. They threw let's call it the mothership if I'm correct in this interpretation, and they rolled the disc on the ground, and whoever got closest to where the mothership ended both laterally and distally got the point in that game. The white man didn't take it this game. They found it a total bore. The Indians were crazy about it because it helped train hunters in their skill in estimating, trying to, say, hit with a spear something you had to kill to get something to eat, and things like that. They loved the game. Literally, the white man said when they came, these guys were sometimes losing their own wives and their loincloths and betting on this game. But by the time the white man came, they had reduced these to a more practical game piece with smooth edges. But that's the story. And let me say, I'm not going to call anybody, but one chief scientist at the Goddard Space Flight Center saw these and told me, I consider that some of the best evidence of extraterrestrial visitation that I have ever heard of or seen, even considering the evidence in modern times, because ancient people made something like that. There's nothing else in the imagination that could possibly be.
Right. I mean, especially with the dome on the top and everything just like that. Someone says they Googled Hopewell Indian Mound discs and could not find anything online, and wanted to know why.
Well, they need to go to your Facebook. There are only known. There are 2 more of those out there that I want to get into the collection. As I told you, I showed you pictures of both of them, but I have the other 4. These are rare. This was a game that originated right there among the Hopewell, but it quickly became. Well, it wasn't a game, I don't think, originally, as I said. But they began to make these. First, they eliminated the dome and made a pit on both sides so they could take the thumb and the index finger, take them and roll them, and then they gradually, it was more difficult. They had to make the surfaces so hard before they played this game that they had to, these sharp-edged discs were damaging the surface. So they realized that they began to flatten them, and finally when the white man came, they looked like tires. Well, you look under Mississippian discs and you see plenty of these, but these are so rare that you're going to see them. I said you can see them on your Facebook page, or I can provide people with images of these things, but they're that rare. These were the initial magical objects that had gradually got transformed to accommodate the game. So you can see the game pieces, but as you'll find many of the game pieces that, like when the white man came, as you go back, they become more and more narrow. And then when you get back to the few, they're all made of hematite. There's only one game piece with a flat edge that I showed you a picture of. I don't have it in my collection. That was made in the later times. But initially they were made of hematite, probably because hematite has a way, particularly the gray metallic-looking version of it, that looks very much like a UFO often looks. So I can't help it if there are not many of them. That's the way we have to report culture as we find it. And I can't manufacture fictional discs. There were only a few made initially, apparently.
Didn't you say that someone tried to fake something similar to that?
Yes. There was a guy who's a well-known meteorite dealer, and he had a really corny-looking fake that he said, well, it was made by the Mayans. Well, there's nothing like this that ever came out of the Mayan culture. And I looked at him immediately. It was obvious. I can tell you how they faked it. I mean, it was so obvious it could be. And then there was one other one that there was a genuine disc that a guy in the auction business had, and I wanted to buy it. But just happened he had somebody who wanted to pay more money for it. And he sold to this guy, but he said, well, I'll send it to you. Well, he sent me a fake. I don't know if he had made it up or he knew it. He had never put that one up at auction. And because he sent it to me, as soon as I got it out of the package, I recognized that somebody had tried to. And my wife walked in from work that day before she had retired. And she said, Ray, that thing's to say. I said, of course, look in one of the little holes here. You can use some from the metal from the drill bit. But they don't have the patina of age like the real things. They don't even have the same feeling. You feel you've got a totally artificial. You don't get the feeling about these. And those are the only two fakes I've seen. And I guarantee you, there might be idiots out there that would buy them. They're not going to fool me. I'm known for my ability to look closely.
And I agree totally. You can definitely tell something, because that's my line of work. You know, you immediately can just have this feeling about it, and actually the way it handles as well. So I'm going to pass the mic to Ben. We're going to be talking back to you, Ray. I want you to discuss the Apollo 14 moon landing a little bit later on. But Ben, you and Tony, I want you to talk about some of the cases you investigated, more recently, or interesting cases. But also, how far away are you from here right now?
About 35 miles or so.
Okay.
Of course, with traffic, that can be a long time, like tonight.
Yeah. So you're up here more for an education than anything else. Is that right? I mean, you're not really investigating any particular cases, or are you, that Ray's involved in?
Well, no, we're not. We're learning, but we're finding out more about the Socorro incident and things like that. Ray was nice enough to provide me a copy of the trend photograph that Tony and I worked on through the Photoshop application, and we could see the exact same downflow that was there. It's not something we made happen. We took the image, the raw image, and found that downflow at the bottom of the trend photograph. And so it's there in the image. So in a way, we investigate some things, but really it's kind of like going to school. Ray's the teacher, we're the students.
Yeah. So why don't you talk about some of the cases that you've worked on?
There's been some strange things. A lot of things, probably I'd say 98%, it turn out to be things that are explainable. Sometimes we get cases that are very unusual, and the more unusual they are, the more you can't figure it out. It's just like what we were talking about. Nobody has any idea if these things come from another planet, another dimension. I always make the joke that they could be interdimensional, they could be time travelers, they could be ET, or they could be ET interdimensional time travelers. So some of the cases we've worked are, it's hard to get really good cases that happen right away. A lot of them are old cases reported again. We did have, to give you a more up-to-date case, on the 4th of July when we were shooting off some maybe not so legal fireworks. We were. I actually was a witness to an object that looked like a star. I happened to follow a trail of a rocket going up over Lake Anna, and I saw what looked like a star, a little bit less magnitude than Venus, but certainly brighter than a background star. And it was moving, and the one thing that caught my eye was that this thing was at least at 30,000 feet, looked like maybe a jet you would see at night where you could barely see it, but it was completely white, had no navigational lights, had no strobe, had nothing like that. But it traversed the sky in about 8 or 9 seconds. And if this thing was really far away, say 100,000 feet, that's going really fast, easily over 1,000 miles an hour. What was interesting was I told Tony about this, and his girlfriend saw it also. So she independently said that she had seen the same thing. So at least I had somebody else that saw it, and as an investigator, I'm looking at it the whole time thinking, okay, I'm going to figure out what this is in a minute, but it traversed the sky so quickly and was so high up, I have no idea what it was, but it's nice to see something yourself. And actually, Tony investigated the case because you can't investigate your own sighting. But it's one of those things that we put as an unknown because I have no idea what it was, but it was moving really fast at a great distance. Some of the cases that are more interesting, we've had in Virginia cases where we have landings. We had an individual who was actually supposedly was photographing and filming things in kind of the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia that was told through some other intermediary agencies to stop photographing what he was seeing. We had a case up in that area where families were afraid to go out at night because of things that were. One mother told me that things were coming down so low out of the sky that she was frightened to go out at night, and several of her cattle were mutilated in an area where you wouldn't expect somebody would try to pull a prank or fake something because it's so isolated. The fact that anybody even found this was just very unusual. So we have photographic.
Just stop right there.
Sure.
I want to ask you: are there a lot of cattle mutilations going on? I mean, it's
Virginia,
just really
no.
rare.
No, it happens in the Midwest, and there's a lot of theories. I mean, a pretty good theory. I know that cow blood has a lot of properties similar to human blood. It could be a government project where they're testing the radiation of the downfall of a lot of the Trinity tests. These happen in an area where they're trying to map radiation over generations of cows, possibly to see how much they've been affected by this area that we used to, blow up atomic bombs in. I believe that some of these things, maybe a lot of them, are man-created. That's a whole other subject. You do get some weird cases where they end up on telephone poles and things. But in Virginia, we don't really have cases like that. We have cases of missing time. We have cases of abduction. Very hard things to prove or disprove. We do get some photographic evidence that shows some of the things that Ray has shown us where it looks like plasma's involved. There's colors in these objects that would be really hard to fake, hard to be an LED light from a drone, and that's a problem we have lately. With the advent of drones, Chinese lanterns, we get a lot of cases that turn out to be exactly that. One that was posted all over the Internet was a UFO that got stuck in a tree, and it was a drone that had come from another country. A family was visiting. Their kid got the drone stuck in a tree, and it fell out one day, but the Internet picked it up, and it was a great sighting in Virginia. And, we're like, we saw this and looked at it. Like, right when Tony was about to set up a visit to see this guy, he walked over, and it had fallen out of the tree, and it was an LED light on a drone. So it's tough to get the good cases when you get them. It's very unusual. It's like, I can't remember if it was Arthur C. Clarke or Carl Sagan said, if you come to contact with a very advanced race, it's going to look like magic. And some of these things are so strange that you can't even tell what they are. All you can do is record them, get as much information as you can, as much evidence as you can, but you're still baffled at the end.
Yeah. I agree with that as far as, and Tony, I'm going to ask you, one of the things you hear, you just mentioned in the first part of that was, what are they, interdimensional time travelers, all that. The thing that I think is really interesting about the time travel, I'm not saying that I agree that's what it is, but if you really think about it, think of how much different we would look a billion years from now. So if something could actually travel back, if it didn't matter how far back, 2 billion or whatever, it's very possible, another type of being can evolve. We may be wiped out anyway within 100 years, who knows? And something else may evolve and come back to see what we're all about, type of thing. So it's not to be ruled out of all the cases, that's for sure. I mean, that's some people think that it's only that. Some people think it's only military craft, secret military craft, or some people think it's only alien. I tend to head toward the ET theory of what most people are seeing, for the unexplained ones. But that's just my own armchair opinion, I should say. Tony, so you said you've been at this, did you say since 2009? Is that what you said?
The 90s.
What's that?
Since the 90s.
Oh, since the 90s you've been at this. So what are some of the interesting cases that you've actually worked on?
Well, Ben mentioned most of them. Some of the more interesting ones you'll probably find on Hangar 1. I already told in Southern Virginia about that trucker, and I'm not going to talk about it because you can watch the show. Uh-huh. But just to... one of the things I hope Ray talks about, because you mentioned this whole time travel thing, I hope you get into talking about time compression, which is one of the most fascinating things of photographic evidence that he has captured. Now, one of the things that Ben and I went through our minds when we first met Ray, we thought, if we hang out with this guy long enough, we're going to see something. So after, right. I don't know how many 100 visits we made to Burger King and traveling, we talked so much that we never really took enough time to look up in the sky. But then again, one of the things Ray taught us that's most important is that he sees what other people do not see. People are usually looking at the world, interpreting the light coming back to their eyes as what they're used to seeing. And what Ray does is that he's able to see those things. You look downstairs, you see all those fossils that he's found. I probably walk over 1,000 fossils in my lifetime. I never thought to look down and pick one up or what have you. But the same thing is true. One of the things he said also was make sure you look for these things in the daylight. Why waste your time at night? You can see a lot more when there's more day. It's like that old joke. It's like you see someone looking for something in a spot where there's a bright light, and this guy comes to help that person. What happened? Well, I lost my contact. Or where'd you lose it? Well, I lost it over there where it's dark. Why are you looking over here? Because it's light.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
That's not exactly how it goes. But anyways, so what happened over time, and we're still learning how to do this. But I saw what I was just telling you earlier, what I saw was like a ghost rocket, for lack of a better term. I don't know what it was. I don't think it was alien. Who knows what it was? But it was something that I would normally look up and not pay much attention to. I'd probably glance at it and look away and think I was probably an airplane. But in this instance, I'm thinking, Ray's words are ringing in my head, and he's saying, well, what can that be? How fast is that thing moving across the sky? Why is that contrail looking unusual? And, of course, the first thing Ray says to me is, you take a photograph of it. Well, I was on the phone with my camera. My camera's my cell phone, although I wish I could just keep a 35-millimeter, super telephoto lens camera around my neck all the time. I don't know how weird that would look, but anyways. So most of the cases I have been seeing as of late are interesting, but they are more or less really great stories. Why? Because it was one person saw something, no corroborating evidence, no photograph, no video. Nobody else saw it. It's just somebody witnessed something on their way home from work, and it may have been true. It may be, it could be a very, genuine case. But how do you investigate that other than, calling the person, talking to them, and then recanting exactly what they've already reported? There's nothing more. There's no more substance to that. So unless there's a second or a third person or a photograph or just some kind of soil sample you can get or some sort of rock evidence, of which Ray seems to have a little bit of everything in this house when it comes to those things, which makes a lot of his cases, so credible. It's really hard to say, what a really great case is unless it's like what Ben was describing, something that you can actually analyze and something you can actually really investigate other than hearing a really good story.
Right. So anyone can call in the show. All they have to do is dial 603-967-4030 if you have a question for anyone here, Ray, Tony, or Ben. And so the microphone's back in Ray's hand now. I want to ask, go ahead, if you would, and follow up with what Tony just mentioned about your thoughts on this time compression as part of the technology and travel.
This is something that, as a hypothesis, was pretty much forced upon me. I never really thought much about this until I had been up in New York City to be on the famous old TV show called To Tell the Truth. It was the latter days of the show when Joe Garagiola, the famous baseball catcher, was host. Wonderful guy. And I had to go up there and spend 3 hours training guys to pretend they were me in the show. But anyway, it's ironic that the name was To Tell the Truth, because to tell the truth, I really learned a lot more about UFOs on the flight back than I ever learned in my whole life. I learned to recognize the euphoria. And by golly, we got on the plane. It was overcast. It was freezing in New York and LaGuardia, flight to Dallas-Fort Worth. And so we take off through what they call the pea soup, the clouds. And I felt the euphoria. Now, my wife was pregnant with her first child, who was born in mid-May, and this was December 12th. And I said, Kitty Bo, I feel the euphoria. When we get through this cloud, there's going to be one right outside this window. She said, look, Ray, you've showed me so many of these since we got married. Don't you dare wake me up. I am nauseated with pregnancy. I'm coming down with a terrible neck ache. Don't wake me up. I don't care. So she lay back in her seat, and then after about a half minute, she pulled her head up and said, well, unless you see a mothership, if you can show me a mothership, you wake me up. I said, okay. Well, she's laying there trying to go to sleep or to sleep. The moment we got through the clouds, here was an amazing spherical object with a little dome on top of it. It looked shinier than those Christmas tree balls. There was shiny liquid mercury. It's actually, I found out, it's a plasma state of laminar plasma. The reason you see metallic in an object is because the outer electron shell, the way it reacts with light. And when you get that plasma state along the surface, it looks just like it's shiny metallic. People say, I saw a metallic disc. I'm sorry. In my experience in filming these things, when they don't have the plasma around them, they're not even made of metal. They're made of an exotic material. But anyway, I look out and here's this thing. And we're climbing, and it's keeping pace with it. It's coming up. And then I decided, I'm going to film it. Foolishly, I had locked my salesman's case that my camera was in. That was under the seat in front. I pull it out. I take the two locks, unlock the locks, and I begin to think about it. Oh, my God, I got to get... Well, I got emotionally involved, and this thing took off like the bat out of hell, straight up. And I saw it break through a thin layer of clouds up above, knock right through the clouds, and go right straight on up. It was gone. Well, and I hadn't said a word to my wife. My promise is good. And, several hours later in the flight, I begin to feel the euphoria again. I look out the window, and by golly, here is the same kind of object, but now it's blacker than the ace of spades. The only place it has any reflection on it is where the sunlight hits it at what in physics is called a Brewster's angle. Let's say an oblique angle, a small angle. And then it will reflect off. Otherwise, it all goes into this, whatever this energy state is, I don't know. But the same object. And it's moving with this axis of radial symmetry slightly tilted in the direction of travel. And it's moving faster than our jet. Well, our jet was moving at, I believe, Mach 8.9, if I remember correctly from the report from the airline. And this thing had to be going well over the speed of sound. We never felt a shock wave. We never heard an explosion. But it's moving fast. Well, I finally got my camera out. And I got it on it, but the plane bounced. And I lost sight of it because it was on telephoto. So I look up above my telephoto, and my good golly, there is a mothership out beyond that it turns out is going to. Aha, I can wake my wife. And I punched her and I said, honey, there's a mothership.
You punched her?
Yeah, I punched her with my finger on the shoulder. And I said, honey, there's a mothership out there. And she said, oh my gosh, where? And I said, look, get it. The seats were empty. And I said, get up there and look out the window. You'll see it. And indeed, she did. Well, the film I got was a total revelation. In this film, there were things that I had never dreamed of about UFOs. Now, to give you an exotic example, there was this big mothership out there. We later were able to calculate rather accurately, probably accurate to 10% error, the size of the thing. Okay, it was huge. At the end of it, it had big black triangles, deltas, with a slightly wedged backside that backed up and seemed to plug in six of them right into the bottom of it. Before it shot a big blue electric flame-looking thing out the bottom, began to move up vertically. Before it was just moving somewhat sideways, opposite our direction, and it went up vertically. But anyway, in the midst of this, and when we studied the film, there were things, we kept seeing things that seemed so fast, my wife would turn to me, Ray, did you see that? And there were wonderful things. There was one craft that reminded me of the old Mercury space capsule. That it stopped. I swear it came up like it had passed by much further away first, but then it shot up. With both my wife and I said we think it was 120 feet from the window of the aircraft. You've seen a picture of it, and turns out I did a little research on sightings of this. And almost invariably, in 90% of the sightings, it comes flying out of water. Well, we weren't over water, but it zoomed up to our plane. But it came up so fast, and it disappeared so fast, my wife had to say, Ray, did you see that? Well, fortunately, the film got good pictures of it. But here's the thing. When you consider the inertia involved in a stop like that, or a takeoff at that speed, it seems unreal. But let me say that one of the best people in this field, in my opinion, from the standpoint of physical theory, is Dr. Harold Puthoff. Everybody in ufology knows of Dr. Puthoff, and he's been involved in all kinds of interesting research for years. But he and I have talked about this, and he feels that they are locally controlling the rate of time. And there are so many things in this film that suggest it's not only the sudden stop that seems impossible and the immediate acceleration. We don't even see any acceleration time. But let me describe something else. At one point, the mothership's out there. These various objects are flying around more slowly. But here comes a thing in one movie frame that comes across out near the horizon. It looks like it's far away. This object comes across, and its pulse is visible and invisible, visible and invisible. And then about two-thirds of the way over to the right side of the picture frame, it turns and heads in our general direction. And when it gets fairly near, halfway to the plane, it takes a dive into the clouds below at 11,000 feet. There's a problem there. The object is segmented as if it were alternately transparent and opaque. Here's the problem. Its shadow under the opaque sections of it is on the clouds. But when you calculate the time that the shadow would have been there, considering how fast it was moving, the shadow should not be visible because it was there too short a time. So one night I'm up trying to study this. What the heck is going on? Well, my wife, bless her heart, she got up to take care of our youngest baby, and she's walking through the hall. I said, hey, take a look at this. I've been trying to figure this thing out for 2 hours. She's looking and said, Ray, it's obvious. Time is compressed, and it's taking more time than actually what you're seeing. And it's leaving a shadow. Well, this sounds paradoxical, but so does Einsteinian time dilation and a lot of other things. And but having discussed this with Puthoff and other people into physics, it's not a far-out idea at all. And this, as I said earlier, if you manipulate time, you can manipulate gravity. You don't have to create an artificial gravity. You can control your gravitational relationship by controlling time. And we have other examples, even more amazing than this, that are possibly accountable for by the time compression phenomenon. And I won't go into some anecdotal cases that have been reported, but, well, I will mention one. There were some ladies down south in the U.S. That saw one night, they saw a craft, and they could see inside the windows, and there were occupants inside. There was one problem. They said it looked like somebody sped up an old movie, and these guys are dashing around like you speeded up a movie about 5 or 10 times faster than it should be running. These guys were dashing around like crazy inside this craft. Now, I don't think this is the kind of thing that somebody making up a hoax, and it was multi-witness, is going to make up. I believe that there was time compression, and they were seeing these guys doing a lot more faster than we would expect them to do. There's another case like this that's from Europe. There are cases from South America, and there are things in our film that suggest this. So I think that's enough on this subject, but I'm pretty well convinced that this is a phenomenon, and if anybody wants to talk to me about instrumentation, I can suggest some instruments that I believe could help document this and quantify this from the standpoint of physics.
How do you think that could happen? Well,
of course, we can only guess. I can tell you a crude paradigm that I might describe. I read an article when I was on an airliner one time by a well-known physicist who's very concerned about the study of black holes. And, of course, most of us know they are so massive that they curve not only space but time into them. And as the time gets drawn in, of course, time is being compressed as well as space, but it's drawn into this black hole, this space-time singularity or something, whatever it is. They also now believe there's probably gray holes as well, whatever that means. But anyway, let's say this article, the gentleman said, the physicist who was talking, said in the birth of the universe, theoretically, there were umpteen countless microscopic black holes. He said, no, if we want to really get an energy source, what we do is we capture a microscopic black hole, and we keep it at certain controlled distances from us and use that energy. Well, there are some things in some of the films that could possibly suggest that there is a micro black hole in orbit around some of these objects. Their seeming time compression appears to go in pulses. There are other phenomena that might suggest this. If you wanted to compress the time, you control its orbit and bring it in closer, and your time is more compressed. You spread its orbit out, and your time slows down, and your relationship to local gravity changes accordingly, according to the formula for example, acceleration due to gravity. And another interesting thing, in filming the famous beam ahead objects in Corpus Christi in 1985, October 5, in broad daylight, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but let me try to get back to what we filmed there. Well, I'm not going to get on there because I have lost my train of thought. I get myself sidetracked. Need my wife here to tell me where I was going.
Yeah, that's okay. So, if they're indeed using this time compression, how would that actually help them do interstellar travel?
Well, there's no problem. You don't depend on an atmosphere. You're not even use a rocket. You could create. There's been theoretical physicists and other persons that have talked about this. You create a time differential behind and in front, and you move along a time differential column, and you can move forward or move wherever you want to. Also, theoretically, if you can control space-time, you might also be able to travel space instead of in space. Instead of occupying an infinite number of places, some people might use the sci-fi term wormholes. But in theory, you could travel space without traveling an infinite number of points within it. I'm not a physicist, so I won't try to tell you how that would be done. But I really believe. Let me say this. In Corpus Christi, on that date that I mentioned, something remarkable happened. When I was first filming this with the people there on the pier, there were all 6 of us there watching this, and there were hundreds in the park that surely were watching it too. They weren't watching me, but watching Ed. But the ones on the pier were watching me and Ed. And I'm filming. This is the first one of the procession that my kids pointed out to me. And by golly, I'm filming, and all of a sudden I'm in full telephoto. And all of a sudden the thing is over 2.5 times the diameter it was a moment before. And oh my God, how you think disaster. I think, oh my God, I'm using a Canon, you call it 1014 auto zoom with 22 glass elements. Oh my God, some kind of weird energy from this thing has collapsed my glass elements and artificially magnetic. I put my camera down and I started cursing right in front of my kids. Damn it, this camera has screwed me up. The lens is broken. And my daughter, 6 years old, said, Daddy, what happened? I said, it magnified the thing when it couldn't magnify it because it was set at telephoto. She said, Daddy, we saw it too. It just got bigger. And the lady standing beside us said, yeah, it just got bigger. And her 21-year-old daughter said, yes, it just got bigger. Her husband at the end of the pier shouted, yeah, I watched it. I said, well, did you see it zip down to us? And he said, no, it didn't come down toward you, but it just got bigger. Well, I got to thinking about this, and I deduced that when an object changes its time quotient relative to the camera or the observer, it changes its size. So I wrote Hal Puthoff. And Buster's Hardy answered me. And I said, Hal, I think I've deduced that when something changes its time quotient relative to the observer, it will change its size relative to the observer. Hal Rummy, he said, Ray, he said, here's the link. He said, this is a paper I just published quite recently. He said, you won't understand the mathematics, but read what I say. Look at the diagrams. He said, what I show is that if an object compresses its time or dilates its time, its size will change accordingly. He said, Ray, what amazes me is how in the world did you come to this conclusion without the mathematics? And I said, well, Hal, I guess you just call it intuition. I don't know what that is, but call it that.
And let's talk a little bit about Mirabeau and how UFO evidence actually might have progressed mankind a little bit.
Yes, I believe they're dead. Let me encourage everybody. Look, folks, you can pay that much for a fast food meal, $9. Please, Google X descending.
Chris Lambright's
and
book.
buy Chris Lambright's book called X Descending. Half of it deals with the Benowitz case, which I'm not that interested in, but is interesting, and he shows some amazing photographs that Benowitz shared with him of things he was seeing on the base there, where he was seeing from his rooftop and photographing. But the other half of it deals, Chris has done the most superb investigative reporting that I've ever seen in ufology. Now look, folks, it's only a digital book. It only costs you $9, the cost of a cheap meal. Please, don't cheat yourself. Read the book. This man saw this pictures from this film that I showed him, and he said he said my BS meter was working. He said when I saw this, I knew it was the real thing. And he said I had to investigate it. Well, subsequently to this, when I showed this to him, I was contacted by one of the guys who was getting his master's degree at UT. And he was into aerospace, and he was into UFOs, so I invited him over, and I showed it to him, and I explained, this beam ahead actually is communicating with the air, electrifying it, moving along the magnetic column produced by the energy flowing in the beam, and then it gets stronger right at the object, of course, and it moves it right around it, so it could move without creating a hypersonic shock, because it's not pushing the atmosphere, it's pulling it around it. And he said, my golly, I think you're right. So he went up to get his PhD at Rensselaer Polytech, the best school probably in the world if you want a great degree in aerospace. And his professor in charge of his program was Professor Dr. Lake, L-E-A-K, Marabo, M-I-R-A-B-O. And after I got up here, I let him know I'd moved up here to Maryland in early 86. And in early 87, he called me and he said, Ray, would you be willing to show what you've got, this beam ahead, to my Professor Marabo? I said, of course, I'd be delighted. Well, he brought him down. They were coming for an advanced propulsion conference at Goddard Space Flight Center 3 miles from here. And they spent much more time here than they did at the conference. And he told me what he got here was way beyond things at the conference. I ended up showing him this, and I said, look, if you will electrify a column of air in front of there, I said, if you could do this, you will see that even with a crude simulation of this beam, you will find that a craft will move with 10 times the efficiency as it would without it. Well, he had come to see me because he was under contract to design a magnetohydrodynamic aerodyne powered by a beam from the ground with a magnetic field moving electrified atmosphere around it. And he wanted to know if what I had said, and we saw this, and he said at least 3 times, one in front of my wife, and she'll verify this to you. He said, Ray, I want to thank you. You have given your government a quantum leap through the atmosphere and into space. He said, there's one question I want to ask you, though. He said, I'm going to give you it's an over-inch thick book of the whole design at that point that he had done for the Air Technical Intelligence Command, or what it was called, on the book. I've got it and can prove he gave it to me. And he said, we know how to prepare this thing. We know to beam energy to it, to give it the energy. It doesn't have to carry fuel. We don't know how to land it. He said, when you get the plasma swirling around it under the Lorentz force, magnetic force, he said, if we open those landing gear out, you, as an engineer, you want to put them as far out as you can from the center for stability and landing. But he said, if you put them out there, it's going to become total chaos. It'll create shockwaves, and the plasma could wreck the craft, kill the pilot, destroy a multi-billion-dollar craft. And he said, so how do we land it? I said, you land it the way ET operators do, or whatever these guys are that are coming here. He said, what do you mean? I said, I showed him a drawing of one that had landed in Puerto Rico, and occupants got out. I said, look, you open the landing gear in the magnetic vent where the plasma's not swirling, not out on the rim where it's swirling. He said, my gosh. Scott called me. When they headed home, they got back to Rensselaer at 2 in the morning. He said the professor ran upstairs to the electronic drafting machine, drew in the new schema for the Air Force's, for his Air Force contract, and immediately sent it electronically to Wright-Patterson in response. He said, you would have been thrilled to see Professor Marabo run up the stairs and do this. Marabo told me he wanted to encourage a colleague of his to come and see this, and he didn't. And the colleague refused to come. He said, I'll never come and listen to a hoax or a liar that's faked a film of a UFO. He said, okay, go ahead. Believe it's fake and come anyway. He'll still give you a clue that will give you a quantum breakthrough. The guy, unfortunately, never came. But Marabo followed through, tested it in the wind tunnel, and it came out in Aviation Week and Space Technology magazine. And they showed, by electrifying the air in front of it, it said it may be the biggest breakthrough in aerospace history. And by golly, it said this can move at hypersonic speeds in the atmosphere with only 1/10 of the energy, which is exactly the figure I quoted to the professor. With only 10% of the energy it would if we weren't moving that out of the way with the beam ahead. And so he went ahead with it. My wife in the halls at Goddard heard two engineers talking, saying, "Have you heard about this amazing air spike that Professor Marabo has talked about in Aviation Week this week?" I said, "Isn't it amazing that he came up with this idea?" She was so tempted to stop and say, "I'd like to tell you where he got that idea." But Chris Lambright, much to his everlasting credit, he researched more than anybody in this field as far as checking on things. He went through every scientific paper that Marabo had published, and he conclusively showed that Marabo had not have this idea until he came here. After all, he thanked me for giving the breakthrough. Not only that, but a few weeks later, when he reported to another scientific conference here about the air spike craft and showed the diagrams of it and explained it, he sent me a copy of it because he had concluded the new landing gear schema, and I've got it to prove that he sent it to me.
Wow. It's a live show with Ray Stanford. Anyone can call in at 603-967-4030. Yeah, that's amazing. I'm wondering why that technology is not used on every single rocket launch right now.
Well, of course, breakthroughs in technology take time. There's money, for one thing. And let me say that the last I heard 2 years ago, I have pictures of it, I can show you, they're on the Internet. There's a huge, let's call it a giant scientific mobile home that is grounded and insulated from all microwave, and that Professor Marabo and his crew, they have it decorated with Western-style, Southwestern decoration inside, and is grounded, and they're out in New Mexico testing this magnetohydrodynamic aerodyne, but because it's powered by this high-energy microwave beam, they have to be protected, so this whole thing they work in is a Faraday cage that isolates them from the outside RF signals and grounds it, but they're doing this, and it is being tested. Now, I don't know how far they've gotten. I mean, I saw the report. He openly showed this beautiful trailer with these fabulous paintings on the outside of it, of this craft moving through the atmosphere, simulation of his paintings. But they're out there doing that. Now, of course, I don't know how classified it is, but he told about he showed where they're doing it from. And this is mobile in case, I guess, it gets too dangerous to microwave in one area, they can move to another area where it's safer and affecting people or technology locally less. But research on it is going on. But keep in mind that when we filmed these objects, there was a procession of 7 objects that were showing this beam ahead. These people are way ahead of us. It takes them a while to develop a most efficient way of doing this. So even though they tested in the wind tunnel and proved how efficient and wonderful it is, we don't know how far they may have come in actual applications in flight.
Right, right. So I promised earlier that you would talk about, you were actually listening live to the Apollo 14 landing on the moon.
Yes, indeed.
And what exactly did you hear? And I'm encouraging anyone out there, if you happen to have the original recording of that, you weren't able to record it because you were in a car or something, right?
Yes. It was, this would be my former wife and I, not my present wife, and I and a couple named Dwight and Jeanette Pryor. We were driving to Phoenix. I was going to go lecture there, and we were driving across West Texas when Apollo 14 landed on the moon. And, of course, we know that Edgar Mitchell was on that flight, as well as whatever the other fellow.
Alan Shepard.
Alan Shepard was on that flight, and one. I guess there were 2 others. I think 3 of them landed on the moon, or was it 2? But anyway, we're listening. Now, when it landed, they had to change the schedule of what they're going to do. They looked out the window. We heard them describe this. They said they were quite excited about it. You could tell by the voice. There's something strange out there on the surface. I was expecting to say a UFO landed beside. No. They said there's a thing that looks about the size of a basketball, looks like it's made of transparent greenish glass. The sphere sitting on the surface. And Houston said, "Suit up, go out and get it." Wait a minute. If this is a natural thing that's been laying there for 1,000,000 years or even 100 years, what's the hurry? They said, "Suit up." They had to change their whole schedule. And you can see how this is disguised when the manifest is published today. They're trying to hide it. Here's what happened. They went out and got it, and then they said, "It is aboard." All communication about that ceased, and then they recycled their program of operations. And, of course, we know that Edgar Mitchell spent more time on the surface of the moon than any astronaut in history. But here's the thing. Ours picked up because of the experience that we had involving the Air Force trying to confiscate material that looked just like this that fell from the sky at hypersonic speed and is well documented. And so our ears pricked up. And by golly, I drove from Austin to the Manned Spaceflight Center and the Lunar Receiving Laboratory. And there was a scientist working on the samples in the laboratory. And I indicated to her, look, I want to talk to you. And she came out. And I spoke to her and I said, look, I was listening to the broadcast. And I heard them describe that basketball-sized green glass sphere on the surface of the moon. And that they brought it aboard. Do you think that I and the average person in the public will ever see this? And she said, I don't believe you're ever going to be able to see that. And I said, you sure? She said, just don't plan on it because you're not going to see that. And that was all she said. And I didn't try to press her. I didn't want to lose her job. But I'm convinced that something that was related somehow, technological, was picked up there on the moon. And I believe it's probably one of the biggest national secrets that we have.
So someone on the message board says she heard it live. She doesn't remember that. And she thinks millions did. Why isn't that out there?
Well, she's calling me a liar, but I'm calling her a liar, or else she has very bad memory. In the first place, I would question her how much she heard. We were bored in West Texas, and we didn't want to listen to anything like Rush Limbaugh. So we're listening to this thing all the way through, but our ears didn't prick up until we heard this. Well, let me warn you, there were 4 witnesses. Now, my wife at that time is still living, and she can testify to that. Now, let me tell you what I did. I was interviewed by a guy for the wonderful high-class magazine called Texas Monthly. Steve Harrigan interviewed me, and I told him this, and I showed him the correlated type of material that had fallen that was the same color and we believe might be related to this thing. And I said, look, why don't you check in Houston and ask, I forget the guy's name again, but the astronaut in Houston, you called his name, but
Alan Shepard.
Alan Shepard. Why don't you ask him about this? Well, it's in the magazine. You can check on it. I can give people a link to the whole article. Steve called over there and talked to his secretary and she said, what do you want with him? Now, he was a well-known reporter, highly regarded. He's still highly regarded in literary circles in Texas. And he said, look, Ray Stanford here, who I'm interviewing, tells about what happened on the moon, about this glass sphere, and that they recycled the whole program and rushed out and got it and brought it aboard, and there's no more talk about it. And I want to know if that story's true. And she said, well, I can't guarantee he will answer you. And he said, look, tell him if I don't hear from him denying this, I'm going to presume it's true. And he says that in the magazine, and Alan Shepard never communicated with him. So I took this as a de facto acknowledgement because someone accepted it as true. If you don't tell me it's false, he didn't call and tell him it was false. But by not calling him, he's de facto saying, look, I can't tell you because I'd break national security, but, well, yeah, I've solemnly told you it's true.
So, Edgar, everyone knows, that pays attention to this field, that Dr. Edgar Mitchell is really is backing the fact that there are UFOs and Roswell and all that. So why do you suppose he won't talk about that?
It's very simple. He was under contract with the government. Even my wife, when she worked on the Tracking Data Relay Satellite program, she had to get a security clearance, and she managed it, even the fact that she's married to me, involved in UFOs. And by golly, you sign a non-disclosure contract, and you can go to prison, you can lose your retirement. And I'm sure that Dr. Mitchell has a good retirement. I admire him. He's coming out and saying he believes that there are alien visitation here. But what he knows that he's not under contract to not say is all he can say. This man would lose his skin. If he, more than his skin, he loses his retirement. He might go to prison if he told this. He can't talk. And I don't ask people who are under security agreements to talk. This surely was a security matter. It's like the lady at the Lunar Receiving Laboratory told me, don't count on ever seeing this. So anyway, I'm not going to ask him, to divulge something that he's not supposed to disclose. So we can't expect him. Is he going to be blabbering off his mouth of something and defy his trust that the government had in him? I mean, yeah, the taxpayer paid for this, and I wish they could tell us. I wish they would tell us. But by golly, I don't hold it against Edgar Mitchell for not talking about this.
Right. And are you able to talk a little bit about what the thing you were talking about that landed in, was it Texas? that you showed me today.
Oh, yes. Let me tell you what happened. I won't go into the whole absolutely bizarre story that it took an hour and a half to tell you, but there was, at hypersonic speed, understand that most meteorites, when they fall, do not fall at hypersonic speed. They're subsonic when they hit. They get slowed down to below sonic speed. Only 2 meteorites in history have been at hypersonic speed when they hit the ground. And they were, because they were in an orbit contrary to the direction of the Earth's rotation in its orbit, and so you had the speed of the Earth's rotation on top of their orbital speed component that was opposite the direction, and so they're hypersonic when they hit. Now, they make a big crater. A normal meteorite that hits at subsonic velocity only makes a dent where the thing hit and maybe a little dirt. But anyway, it creates a shockwave. This thing made a shockwave. Ultimately, the government tried to get this. It got out through a story from the University of Texas Department of Economic Geology, and they tried first to get the man to appeal to his patriotism. Then they threatened him with a government injunction, a lawsuit. And then they broke into his house, and subsequently I managed to have the beans were spilled to me by the son of the head of intelligence at Lakeland Air Force Base that had attempted to cover up and threatened him with a lawsuit. And the whole bill was, the beans were spilled, and I learned the whole story behind it. And this material is exactly the description of it. Its appearance is the same thing that they described the sphere as looking like on the moon, as far as the color and the glassy color.
Now, has any other meteorite that you're aware of had any properties like this before?
This was not a meteorite. It's a meteorite in the sense that it fell to Earth out of the sky, but it's not natural. It was analyzed thoroughly by a research institute that was contracted by the University of Texas, and it absolutely was not a meteorite. And they gave me the complete report except for one page of it. And the professor told me, he said, "I'm sorry. I would be in trouble with the Board of Regents if I gave this to you." He said, "There was a finding." He said, "I'll tell you this much, but I will deny it if asked publicly." He said, "This finding would suggest that this was a product of extraterrestrial technology." He said, "Can you imagine what would happen to me with the Board of Regents if I told this, and the media swarm that would come over us?" He said, "I can't give that to you." But he says, "I know your honesty." He said, "I just want you to know that, but I cannot give you the analysis result that suggests it."
Wow, that's pretty amazing. We only have just like less than a minute left here. So, Ray, you want to talk about, is your book available for sale still?
Yeah, the Socorro book, if people want it, all they have to do is go to PayPal and pay to Dinosaur Tracker, one word, at Verizon.net, and pay me $50 for the book and $10 for priority mail tracking shipping. And that's all they have to do.
And you'll sign it?
I'll sign it. I'll sign it in your name if you'll ask me to. I won't sign it in somebody else without their permission, but I'll sign it. Well, I'll do it for a friend if I think it feels okay.
All right. Well, I'm sorry you guys didn't get to talk more, and you made the trip up here from Virginia. So we have Tony, Ben, and Ray. I want to thank you all very much for being part of the show. And I also want to thank you, the listener out there. And next week, we'll be back at the same time here live on the Dark Matter Digital Network. And don't forget to listen to Skywatchers coming up next. And after that, we have Art Bell coming up. And we will see you here at the same time next week. Thank you all very much. And remember, keep your eyes to the sky.